One of the main components for sun salutation is downward facing dog, especially for the hot yoga person. We're going to show you how to get into this posture properly and break down all of the components of sun salutation. So sun salutation, or SURYA NAMASKAR in Sanskrit, the traditional way of starting a yoga class. But if you're a hot yoga person, especially a Bikram person, you say, well, that's not how we start the class. Interestingly enough, that's how Bikram starts his advanced class. And it's not really an advanced sequence. So if you are practicing the 26 and 2 on a regular basis and that's all you're doing, I highly recommend that you add this to your daily routine, and we're going to show you the Bikram Sun Salutation at the end of the video, so make sure you watch it all the way to the end. We're actually going to demonstrate 3 sun salutations with the help of senior Barkan teacher Elena. Are you waving to them? So we're going to do the typical Vinyasa sun salutation. We're going to show you the Bikram sun salutation. We're going to show you the Barkan sun salutation. And I see that a lot of Bikram people are starting to branch out and try different classes. And many times when they come to the Barkan Vinyasa class, they struggle with downward dog. So we're going to break down all the components of downward dog to get you into the best possible position you can be. Now, before we show you the next point, I want you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you're enjoying this video. You want to learn all about hot yoga and the hot yoga world and flows and factoids. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share it with your friends. So we're going to start with what we call Samasthiti. I'm going to have Elena face this front. So you're going to lift your toes and spread them wide, place them onto the ground so all 4 corners evenly distribute. This is what's nicknamed in the yoga world as Tadasana, even though it's inaccurate from a translation point of view. It's actually Samasthiti. When your arms are by your side, you're in equal condition, or Samasthiti. If you bring your hands to your heart center, now you're in Tadasana, because your hands are actually forming the mountain. Tada is mountain. Tadasana is mountain pose. Arms by your side, but in the yoga world, it's just nicknamed Tadasana or mountain pose. So you lift your toes and spread them. Your inner thighs are going to rotate in toward each other. They call that in the Anyasara world the inner spiral. And the tailbone actually turns down. I want you to do me a favor, Elena, and arch your back for a second. This is an arch back, even more than that. Now, turn your tailbone down into a complete tuck all the way through. That's too much. Now back again to the arch. All Elena's going to do is scoop the tailbone down. So she turns her tailbone down to the floor. Arch again, scoop. And when we scoop the tailbone, we widen the sacrum, and automatically we lengthen the spine. So with the feet, inner thighs, tailbone scooped, the upper body is automatically lifted into a perfect Samasthiti. So we're hands to your heart center. That's how we're going to start. Arms overhead. She's going to lengthen up to the ceiling and create some space between her hips and her rib cage. So she creates this major length of the spine. And now I'm going to have her come down with a vertical position, forward fold, which is a really great way of coming down if you've got a crowded class. If you're a yoga teacher, I hope you've got crowded classes. So this is how you cue your people to come down if the class is crowded. Come back up for a second. Elena, however, you can, arms back overhead, come down on a swan dive. Just make sure you don't arch your back too much. So you're coming down on a swan dive, touch your hands to the floor. Now I'm going to have Elena come back up again. Some of you may not be able to get down in that particular fashion because you might have a tight back, you might have tight hamstrings, it might be a 6 a.m. class and your body isn't open yet, so you can bring your arms overhead. Here's a really good modification. I want you to bend your knees pretty far, touch your hands on your thighs. Bend your knees even more. Now touch one hand to the floor, then the other. Now you're down in this really wonderful way of supporting your lower back, and you can come up the same way. One hand to the thigh, then the other, and up you go. And that's a really great way to modify coming down and out of that forward fold position. But if you don't need to modify, we'll have Elena once again, arms overhead, create length. Swan dive forward, bend your knees if you need, touch the floor, and we're just going to soften here. Relax the shoulders, the face muscles in the jaw. If you shift the weight forward into the balls of the feet, what that's going to do is take the pressure off your knees. Now you can get a nice stretch behind the legs. This is a nice, wonderful stretch for forward fold. Now the first thing we do in sun salutation is what we call runner's lunge. And I'm going to have Elena, for this camera's sake, step her left leg back first, even though we usually step the right leg back. This way you can see the angle of this right thigh, because we want the thigh and the knee, we want the thigh parallel to the floor and the calf muscle perpendicular. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is the knee comes forward way past the toes. When they do a sun salutation runner's lunge, this is what they look like, and this can take a lot of pressure on your knee. You don't want to have that knee all the way forward. Bring your foot up a little bit closer up here for a second, even more. So what happens is they're not stepping out far enough. If you step out far enough, now step way out, now the knee can come over the ankle. So you can see the knee right over the ankle, not the heel, because the heel will be too far if you go back this way, but over the ankle. So there's a right angle under the thigh, down the calf muscle. Now an extreme modification for a runner's lunge, if it's just impossible for you to maintain this position, you could drop that back leg down, stay on your toes. Most of you won't have to do that. So straighten that leg. 9 times out of 10, sometimes 10 times out of 10. This, you can even see Elena's doing it now. This hip goes too far forward. So as a yoga teacher, here's a really great assist. Take your hand on the crease of the hip and pull that hip back from here to here. Let's get those hips to square. Shoulders down and back and lift the chest. So the shoulders are square, the hips are square, hamstring to the ceiling, and the heel of this back foot should be right over the toes, up to the ceiling. So now we've established our nice runner's lunge position. The right leg steps back in what we call a high plank as we get ready for Chaturanga dandasana, Chatur 4, ONLNE, Danda staff, 4-legged staff pose. So I like the shoulders to come a little bit forward past the wrists. I'm going to show you why in a little bit. If it's impossible for you to do a yoga push-up or a Chaturanga dandasana, then you can go onto your knees. But if you go on the knees, still stay on the toes. So now Elena's going to come down into her Chaturanga dandasana and back up. Try doing that 50 times on your knees and see what happens to your tricep muscle. It's a really great way of strengthening it. You do this modification for a few times, pretty soon you won't need it anymore, but it's a really great one to do. But if you don't need to modify, you're going to keep the legs straight. Hold the core. We talked about this. Relax your knees for a second, Elena. We talked about this in the awkward pose video. Check that out after you watch this one. The Mula Uddiyana bandhas have to be engaged up and in. This is really important. The Mula bandha at the perineum, the Uddiyana at the pit of the belly, hold them nice and strong and tight and engaged while you're doing this particular Chaturanga dandasana. Now she straightens her legs. I like the shoulders to come forward past the wrist. You're going to hold the core Mula Uddiyana, and she's going to come down to just where the biceps parallel to the floor and back up again. If you were to go too low, go all the way down, touch your chest on the ground. This is what I call, you can just relax completely. This is what I call the cricket arm.
No crickets, no dry ice, no firecrackers.
So this is almost like a traditional push-up. We don't want the body to go all the way down to form the cricket arms. We want the thigh, we want the bicep of the arm parallel to the floor. So back up again. She's going to go down just where the biceps parallel, hold the core, back up. In the military world, the arms are out to the side for a traditional push-up, and that's actually how Bikram does it. In the Bishnu Ghosh world, we keep our arms into the side to strengthen the tricep muscle. So instead of the chest and the bicep, there's the tricep muscle by keeping the arms tucked into the side body the whole time. Now we're ready to transition to upper dog. So once again, the shoulders come past the wrist, holds the core, she goes down Chaturanga into upward facing dog. So let's break this one down. We want the hands closer into the body. I'm going to have Elena come back to high plank again. If your shoulders are past your wrist this way, and now she were to come down to upper dog, her hands are going to be too far forward. And this is what I find in the Bikram world when they come to a vinyasa class. A lot of Bikram people, when they do upper dog, their hands are so far forward, their shoulders lift up to your ears, do that, and they lock out those arms. So they're stuck up here. We want the hands to be back by the hips. Bring your hands way back, even more. All the way back by the hips. So once again, if Elena comes to high plank position, she brings her upper body forward so the shoulders go past the wrist. Now when she comes in upper dog, her hands are automatically placed in position. Shoulders down and back, inner thighs are into that inner spiral, feet are flat. You can push into the floor with the tops of the feet and your hands. And we don't want to hold upper dog for too long. I'm going to have Elena relax. This is a tough one. There's two ways to getting from transitioning from upper dog to downward dog. One, modification, you can drop your knees to the mat, go up on your toes, and down you go to downward facing dog. Great modification. All right, have Elena come back to upper dog again. If you don't need to modify, from upward dog, your knees don't touch the ground, you're gonna flip on your toes, and back you go into downward facing dog. Let's break this down. First, I'm gonna have Elena go to tabletop, because people ask, how far should my hands be from my feet? If you're in tabletop, your hips are over your knees, your shoulders are over your wrists, this is it. Just flip back to downward dog, and there you are in the perfect downward dog. Have you ever taken a Baron Baptiste class? Baron's a good friend of mine for over 40 years. He has a longer downward dog. I like this one, where the hips are over the knees, flip back from tabletop. First thing we're gonna do is to get the shoulders back away from your ears. That's key. Go to tabletop for a second, Elena, so you can relax. Because I find it in the Bikram world, everything's tight, everything's locked out. So when people come to a vinyasa class from the Bikram world, they lock out their arms. We want to pull the shoulders back. We want to soften the elbows. So you don't want to lock out those arms. You want to almost relax more into this position. Downward dog is such an important pose. If you have a dog at home, the first thing that dog does when he wakes up in the morning is to do a downward dog to stretch the body. It's our animal instinct to stretch this way. That's why it's such an important pose. So back to downward dog, Elena goes. We're gonna pull those shoulders back away from the ears. That's our first priority. And soft elbows. Don't lock out those arms, my Bikram people.
Please don't do that.
We're gonna lift the rib cage, and once again, the tailbone turns down, and with that famous scoop, we don't wanna arch the back. So, here's another great assist if you're a teacher. Hands at the hip crease, you're gonna pull the hips back. One of the big problems, people are too far forward, go way forward like this. And if I say pull the hips back, they bring their hands back, walk your hands back. This is what they want to do, that's the instinct. So bring your hands back again and bring your weight forward. Tell them, don't move your hands, just pull your hips back and soften, don't tighten up. Don't lock everything out. So the hips go back and eventually the head and the chest turn down to the floor. The Iyengar, who's famous for this pose, is bring your head all the way to the floor. Hips back, tailbone under. And one thing you don't want to be compelled to do. Elena can do it because she's got really good hamstrings. Don't be compelled to get your heels to the ground. So you can bend your knees. If you bend your knees, that'll help us flatten the spine. I want you to round your spine for a second and bring your heels down. A lot of times I see people trying to get the heels down and it creates this rounding of the spine. So when you bend your knees, it flattens the lower back and the middle back area. So you have a nice tapered line. Eventually your heels can touch down, but don't be compelled to get them down, especially if those hamstrings are tight. And this is a beautiful downward dog position. Now, a really great modification to come back up into that next runner's lunge. You could drop let's have Elena drop her left knee down to the mat first. Bring her right foot forward. Bring it only halfway forward though. And let's say you still can't get that heel up. Take your right hand onto your ankle and pull that ankle up. Now all you need to do is set your hands and straighten the back leg, and there you are in a perfect modification for the other side runner's lunge. Shoulders back, hamstring to the ceiling. She steps her left leg up, rounds up to heart center, does a half moon back bend, and comes back to finish the pose. And if you have any questions or frustrations for Sun Salutation, put your questions down below in the comments. I get to all the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So now I want to have Elena demonstrate all three Sun Salutations. A typical Vinyasa, a Bikram, which is really Bishnu Ghosh Sun Salutation, and the Barkan Sun Salutation. Typical Vinyasa you may find in a Vinyasa class, hands to your heart center, arms overhead, swan dives forward. Her right leg floats back into runner's lunge, left leg back into a high plank, down Chaturanga and right to upward facing dog, back to downward facing dog. Right leg swings through, that brings you to the other side. Runner's lunge, left leg up, round up heart center, you can do a half moon back bend, and arms back to your side. The Bikram Bishnu Ghosh Sun Salutation that we promised to do at the end of this video. So it's in 8 parts. First part, hands to your heart center. 1, half moon back bend. 2, down to a forward bend. 3, squat 4, forwards on the knees the whole time. Right leg back 5, head up 6, left leg back 7, down push up 8, back up 1, right leg up 7, head down 6, left leg up 5, to a forward bend 4, hands to heart center 3, half moon back bend 2, back to center 1. Now I'm going to show you the Barkan Sun Salutation, but I wanted to mention before, which I didn't, which I forgot. The upward dog, downward dog came more from the south, and that's why it becomes more part of their Sun Salutation and not part of ours. So when I came up with my Sun Salutation for my hot yoga and my vinyasa class, I wanted to include the upward dog, downward dogs because they're great transitions. I love these poses. So now what I did was a combination of the two. I wanted to fuse the two together. So here we go. Hands to your heart center, arms overhead. She comes down in a forward bend, pretty much like both of them. Except now we're not going to squat. We're just going to bring that right leg back into the lunge. Left leg back into the high plank. And now she's going to do a double Chaturanga, which honors what Bikram and Bishnu Ghosh do. On the second Chaturanga, upward dog to downward dog, right leg through to runner's lunge, left leg up to forward fold, round up heart center. If you want to do a half moon back bend, that's great. Arms by your side. So I combine the two together, the fusion of the two. So once again, I specifically made this particular video for the hot yoga people, especially the Bikram 26 and 2 people, and I implore you to add this to your daily routine. Do it in the morning when you wake up. It's a great energization exercise. It's going to give you more strength, more flexibility, and it's also a very traditional way to start your yoga practice. Incorporate this in your daily routine. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. You want to learn all about hot yoga. We have flows, tutorials, factoids. And I thank you for watching. Put any comments down below, and we'll see you, are you waving, in the next video. Bye, guys. Thank you.
You're welcome.